Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Copilot Compass, where each week we take a deep dive into Microsoft 365 Copilot. As always, I have the pleasure of being joined by my esteemed colleague, fellow Copilot enthusiast, and our resident smart guy, Logan.
Thanks, Grant. Happy to be here.
Logan, why don't you tell the folks at home a little bit more about what they can expect in this week's episode?
Yeah, so as always, we'll get started with our question of the week, and then we're going to get into our topic, which is preparing for Teams meetings with Copilot. So we're going to go over a few different things you can do to get ready for Teams meetings. So it should be interesting. Excited to get into it. Yeah, make sure you stay tuned to the end for a sneak preview of what we have coming out next, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment.
All right, let's jump into our question of the week.
Let's do it. So let's get into our question of the week. And remember, you can submit your own questions either by leaving a comment on this video or by emailing the email address in the description. So this week, our question is, what's one Copilot myth you'd like to debunk?
Myth you'd like to debunk. Yeah, I think a lot of times people deploy it and then they think that with graph grounding, they're just going to easily be able to find files based on vague prompts. So there's a variety of issues there. Is one, Copilot isn't a mind reader. So if you just say like, hey, can you find that Excel file with the thing in it? Like it's, you've got to be pretty specific. You want to make sure that you've got some keywords that it can work off of, especially words that maybe aren't going to be commonly found in other files. If you can be more specific on where you think it's stored or what type of file it is, maybe where it was shared or who it was shared with, when it was created or shared, like that type, more specifics, the more you can tell it, the better. The other point is that, you know, when you're searching for files, it's really only as easy as the files are, or like this data storage and files are clean. So if you're titling everything off of like weird names, that might be difficult to find. If it's unorganized and unstructured, difficult to find. So it's kind of like, if you're looking for a needle, it's like looking in an organized stack or looking in, a dirt field where it's messy everywhere, like kind of hard to find if everything's cloudy and messy versus maybe a little bit easier if things are clean. So yeah, I would say just, expecting out of the box for it to be able to easily find files, if you're not very organized yourself, is a myth I'd like to debunk. What about you, Logan? You got a myth in mind?
Yeah, one thing I hear about AI quite a bit is that it all kind of like sounds the same. And it's like very easy to tell that, this was written by an AI. And while that can be true, there are like a lot of ways to kind of like work around that and make it sound more natural. And it's all about like prompting Copilot to, it started like coaching Copilot to just to write in a specific way. So, make this sound more professional, make this more casual, etc. So you can kind of add your own flavor of how the message you're having Copilot create sound by coaching it through that with certain steps. But I will admit sometimes it is kind of obvious that AI wrote this, so just be careful about that. But there are things you can do to mitigate that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's a good point. Yeah, playing with the tone of like the voice of a prompt is one of my favorite use cases, to be honest. Like
Yeah.
making emails sound like they're written by a pirate, or taking instructions for an instructional designer and having them written in a haiku. Like those little fun things that are easy to do and kind of make work a little bit more fun and kind of make somebody chuckle from time to time. But yeah, I mean, I think you definitely do. You bring up another good point that's not really related to the question, but I think still important is, when you use these tools as often as you and I do, it gets really easy to see when something was clearly AI generated. It's going to use a lot of those like dash marks and, the kind of the way it formats and structures things. And it just I mean, honestly, can sound generic, especially if you're giving it generic prompts. So that's where, especially if you're producing content, like it's never a good idea to just copy, paste, send. You want to use it as a starting place, use it as a draft, find ways to change it, modify it, restructure it. So it kind of sounds like your tone and voice. But anyways, we digress. Let's move into our topic of the week.
Let's do it.
All right, so today we're going to talk about one of, in my opinion, the best use cases of Copilot. And quite honestly, I think unless you're only having like 1 or 2 meetings a week, which in this day and age, I don't know who's meeting that, infrequently. I think it pays for itself just in this one scenario, and that is preparing for meetings. The meeting summarization, I think a lot of people at this point are familiar with that technology. There's other products that have been out there too for a while, like Fireflies, that people are used to kind of that summarization. And that don't get me wrong, it's a great use case, but preparing for your next meeting is something that is really valuable. And there's a lot of things that it can do. So it can help you, you know, remember what you've discussed in a previous meeting. It can help you if you're meeting with a new customer for the first time with, getting a briefing on it, on them. And then, another one that's really helpful is a lot of times there might be, documentation that was shared with you in advance of that meeting, or, you know, I guess let's touch on that one first. So, like, let's say there's, a big long PDF that's part of the attachment says, "Hey, we're going to review this PDF. Please come, prepared, read through it a little bit, whatever the case might be." You kind of forget about it, or you just get too busy, whatever the case may be. Now you're cramming to get ready for the meeting, and pre Copilot, what you're going to have to do is skim it. You're going to just kind of comb through it. When you do that, you probably miss some things that you should have caught just because you're trying to work fast. So it's not a very effective use of your time, even if it's only a few minutes. But with Copilot, you can have it, "Hey, summarize this for me." You get a gist of it. You might know going into it, like, "Hey, I'm the technical project manager for this particular engagement. So now I might ask some technical questions about, like, hey, what's our project management tool that we're going to be using? What's the infrastructure platform?" Like those types of questions. And you can use, Copilot like a Q&A of, "Hey, answer these questions for me." So now you're at least, in the matter of just a couple of minutes, you're not as prepared as you would be if you read the whole document, but you're certainly more prepared than going into it and saying, "Hey guys, hands up, I admit, didn't read it at all." So
Yeah.
um, today we're going to do two really good demos for you. The first one is probably a little bit more for those of you that are in like client facing or sales types of positions where you're meeting with a company for the first time. And maybe it's, you don't have a lot of background. So we're going to show you how you can, in a matter of, just 3 minutes, be well versed on that customer. And you go into it presenting yourself not quite as cold. You're looking a bit more prepared and organized, and it shows that your company's making the investment in them. So use case number one. Use case number two is going to be prepping for a meeting with somebody that you meet with regularly. So we're going to use Logan and I as our examples here. The scenario here is going to be, okay, my last one-on-one with Logan was 2 weeks ago. I've kind of forgotten what action items came out of that, and what we've discussed. So I want to be prepared for the call. I'm going to ask Copilot to help me remind me of what we discussed last time around. So two good demos for you. Again, really encourage you guys to incorporate these into your day-to-day scenarios. They are going to save you a ton of time, and they're also going to help you just be more prepared for your next Teams meeting. So I'm excited to share these with you. Let's jump into our first demo. All right, so our first scenario, we're getting ready to walk into a meeting with a customer, prospective customer. We're not too familiar with them. I'm not familiar with them. I've just got 5 minutes before the call gets started or the meeting, is started. Maybe I'm even just waiting in their lobby, and I want to learn a little bit more about them. But so we're going to use Copilot Chat for this. If you had a lot of time, you could use the researcher agent. We showed you that a few weeks back. Great tool for this. You can also use Deep Research if you're using the personal version or the free version of Copilot Chat. But yeah, so we'll go ahead and just use, Copilot. Where I've got web switched on here. If this is a customer where maybe I'm meeting with them for the first time, but there's been other people in the organization or other business units that have already met with them, I might want to toggle on that work tab so I can not only get web grounded understanding of the business, but also, hey, do we have any other proposals with them? If we had other meetings with them, what else is going on at the company if I wasn't adequately briefed in advance. So Logan, why don't you pick a company? You got a favorite company? You got to pick a brand name here too.
Okay. Let's go with REI.
REI, great one. Okay. All right. So we're gonna say I'm gonna give it some context. I'm saying I'm preparing for a meeting with REI and want to learn some background information on the company, include headcount, growth, key lines of business, and company culture and values. Okay, so you can change this however you want. We're not going into this selling a specific product, so we might, if we're an IT services company, we might want to ask about their tech stack that they're on. If we're meeting with a specific group, we might want to see if Copilot can find us people in similar roles that might be also present for the meeting. But in this case, keep it generic just for the sake of the example. So I've got an overview here. It looks like they've been around since 1938. Oh, I didn't know they've been around that long. 25 million members. I am one of them. Uh, yeah, structure, consumer cooperative, employee headcount, about 15,000 plus, 2% growth in employee headcount last year. And of course, it's going to cite all of its sources here. Financials. So now I'm getting, maybe if I'm going in with a sales play, I can see it got good amount of annual revenue. So they probably have, some cash sitting around. Now here's where this can be a little bit more valuable. I can go in and understand like, okay, what's their company culture like? That can maybe set an expectation there. You're seeing a lot of companies now, especially like, tech startups that are saying, hey, we are, like kind of demanding is not the right word, like entrepreneurial, like a lot of self-starters. So I might seeing that type of company culture, I might want to know probably, keep the small talk to a minimum. Let's make sure we get right to the point and, no extra fluff versus maybe, a company that's a little bit more collaborative here, urban lifestyle and travel, fitness and wellness. Okay. And that it kind of frames my understanding of their culture as I go into it. Looks like they're reducing emissions. So that's another thing to kind of know as I go in. So in any case, this gives me just a better understanding of the company, helps me understand some of the values and things that they hold near and dear to themselves. And just, kind of having this in the back of my mind, if I can reference this at 1 or 2 points during the meeting as well, it's just going to kind of show to them that we're invested in them too. I'm not just going in to show up just to walk you through a slide deck. We're here because we see a real opportunity. And then, of course, if I've got a little bit more time, I can check these references out and get a deeper dive at any, one given point that we're seeing here. So again, hopefully a good use case for you to prepare for meeting with an organization for the first time. All right, so our next scenario, we've got a meeting coming up. This is a follow-up meeting. So like in our, maybe it's like a project team where you have a scrum that meets once a week, or it could be, in our case, it's going to be one-on-ones. Logan and I have a weekly cadence with each other. I am running a little bit late. I can't remember exactly what all we discussed last week. It's been a crazy week, busy week. Shoot, maybe I'm just coming back from Hawaii and, still on vacation mode. So I want to make sure we don't lose any momentum from what we had already discussed. We pick right back up. We don't have to spend 5 minutes trying to remember what we discussed last time. So for this, I'm going to have to use work grounded data here because what I'm going to probably reference is the last Teams meeting that we had or the last transcription. So I'm going to have to switch over onto the work tab here. And a lot of times you'll see it pop up as a suggested thing at the bottom, suggested prompt, especially if it's like a meeting that's coming up in the next hour. So I'm just going to ask it, let's say, help me prepare for my next one-on-one with Logan. Now we're in a scenario at my team where Logan's the only Logan. So if you've got like, if it's a Ryan, you may want somebody common name, you got other folks, you're gonna have to prompt it with the last name. But for me, it works with just Logan. So we're going to go ahead and blur out some stuff here just for, sensitive information. But, what we're seeing here, I can see when my next meeting is scheduled with him. I can see recent communications that it's summarized, and then it's suggesting a prep list for me here. So review some outstanding approvals. It looks like I review some approvals, checking for any blockers and delays in a project discussion, any feedback or updates on some initiatives here. So we can see that it's kind of giving me some of that background. What I might want to ask it is a follow-up question. Whoa, keyboard issue there. Were there any action items for me in our last one-on-one. We'll see what we get here. Okay, so we're popping up looks like some action items we did discuss. So our apologies that this demo does have a lot of blurred out information. Again, sensitive info here, but hopefully this gives you the gist. And hopefully, if you are an M365 Copilot license user, if you're recording or at least transcribing your team's meetings, this is super helpful for you if you're walking into your next call and just catching up on what you either forgot from the last time you met or, just to serve as a quick refresher, double checking, make sure you caught up on all the action items. In today's journey of the Copilot Compass, we talked to you about prepping for your next meeting. So we showed you two examples. We talked through some additional ones, but the two we demoed today were prepping for your first meeting with a new customer or a new supplier, whatever the case may be, getting some background info on them. The other one we showed you was trying to, make sure that you're caught up on any action items before you go meet with somebody for your next one-on-one. Also could be applicable if you're, like a project team, making sure you catch up on the last project updates, things like that, but just, helping to prep for your next one-on-one or team meeting.
Yeah, this use case in specific is definitely something that I personally use quite a bit, and one of my favorite Copilot the scenarios. Yeah, it's super helpful, and I use it all the time. So if you learned something and enjoyed, feel free to like, subscribe, and comment. And remember, we have our Q&A sessions every episode, so make sure you drop us those questions. And new episodes come out weekly on Tuesdays.
Yeah, next week, we are going to discuss a little bit different here, but I think really good one for those of you that are in like small and mid-sized businesses or startups. If you're trying to get M365 Copilot and convince your managers that it's worth it. So we're gonna show you how to use the business calculator to justify the return on investment based on just individual use cases. And you're gonna find that $30 per user per month, it's pretty quick to justify. So even just some of the ones we talked about today, for me, it's like honestly, if I remember correctly, it's like 20x paying for itself according to this calculator. So we'll show you how you can do that. Really helpful if you're working to try to convince your management or your, asset providers, uh, that this license is worth it. So stick around, check it out next week, and we'll cover that scenario.